Out of the Ordinary Insights, brought to you by Investec Specialist Bank.
Welcome back to Captains of Industry. In the studio with me this week is Francois Kuttel, who's the CEO of Oceana. Francois, we were talking just before the break about protein, and I was suggesting that perhaps as people get richer, they move away from the lower, what have been traditionally lower to middle income brands like Lucky Star, and moving on to other things. You told us that you've created a brand that is more aspirational, if you like. But what about the bigger picture? Because we've got some fairly nasty numbers coming out of the South African consumer and also retailers. In other words, their profits not quite as good as they used to be because the South African consumer is under pressure. Are you seeing that at Oceana?
Yes, we are in the shorter term. You know, over the long term, the last 4 or 5 years, we've seen tremendous growth coming out of our can range as we've filled up the marketplace. I indicated to you we're sourcing globally now, so we've had a much better supply into the market. What we have seen over certainly the last quarter, the last half year, is a plateauing of demand, and we're starting to get some data coming out of the trade saying that the short term, you know, people are finding the going tough out there, and we've seen certainly data that indicates that demand is off year on year for protein in general, and we've seen that translate into some of our can sales as well.
Well, what might it play in your favour because of the pricing between yourself and other proteins? People actually switch towards you. You're more of a defensive protein than the others.
To a degree, yes, we've seen some of that, but there's a whole tier that even operates below us. And we have seen people switch out of the category as affordability becomes an issue. So certainly the ability to increase price, etc., is at the moment quite constrained.
When did this start manifesting itself? When can you pinpoint the fact that the South African consumer wasn't consuming as much of your product?
I think it's sort of been in, we've started to see it over the last 3 to 6 months really. And we've started to see some of the challenges that the consumers are having. You know, don't get me wrong, there's still robust demand out there, but people are being a bit more frugal with their pocketbooks at the moment.
Yeah, I can imagine. What about your expansion? Because you've just said that at certain times demand is better than other times. The only way you can really expand is by selling more fish. Do you divert your excess to, for example, the overseas markets? What's your export policy?
Well, certainly on the canned fish side, we've been struggling for a number of years just to satisfy the South African demand. And so our strategy has been, as soon as we satisfied the South African demand, we would then go into the rest of Africa. We believe that certainly our red can range has huge saliency into the rest of Africa. But until we could satisfy demand here, we hadn't gone there. We are now activating those plans. We finally got into a position where we have stock that we are able to take into Africa.
Yeah, and what about beyond Africa? Because I don't know about you, but I think Lucky Star is actually rather a cool brand, and it would go down well if slightly rejigged in places like Europe, because Europe's not exactly shooting the lights out in terms of economic performance, and it's well priced.
Now, we do have a presence already in the UK. We have the brand Glenrick, which is here. It's not owned by us in South Africa, but we do have the rights in the UK. We acquired it some time ago. And we have been the brand leader in the UK in pilchards for a number of years, and we are using that as a springboard under that brand into the rest of Europe. We've seen some demand, muted demand, mainly coming out of some of the newer citizens of Europe that have moved there from Africa, etc., that have a taste for the product that we vend.
What about the rand? Does that help you? Obviously it helps you on the export market, but does it affect your operations elsewhere? We're pre-recording this, obviously, and I noticed the rand was 10.10 about half an hour ago.
The rand does affect us, and we've switched over the last few years from a company that has been essentially predisposed to a weaker rand to, in the last couple of years, to a company that's been predisposed to a stronger rand, and that has been because of the volume of imports we've been bringing in to satisfy our canned fish demand. Last year, 65% of our canned fish was actually imported. Now, we've been able to do a better job of procuring and securing here in Southern Africa. So this year we anticipate, or the coming year, we anticipate that those numbers will drop, and will take us back to a company that is predisposed to a weaker rand. I think, however, the extreme volatility we've seen over the last few months is not good for either way.
No.
You've got to be able to plan on it, and so you know, over the longer term we can set the company up for a certain level of rand exposure, but the volatility does affect one's income statement.
Yeah, we've touched on a couple of problems in South Africa, problems that don't seem to be going away. The currency factor you've just mentioned. We've spoken about demand falling because of the South African consumer being under a bit of pressure in the last 6 months or so. Another one is a big one, and that is labour relations. Now, you've got an impeccable BE credentials, have done for a while, and I know that people like Brimstone wouldn't be investors in Oceana if it weren't for that fact. Have you had any problems?
We've worked hard at our BE credentials because we are in a political industry, and an industry that involves us reapplying for our rights on a periodic basis. And the ongoing transformation of the industry, the fishing industry, is of huge strategic importance to government. And so we work very hard at ensuring that at all levels we are as empowered as possible. We are the second most empowered company on the JSE behind Nedbank, and we're very proud of that. In respect of labour relations, again, we work very hard at that. We've been fortunate in the number of years to have had very good relations with the various unions that represent our workers, and we continue to work at maintaining those good relations.
But of course the workers and the unions that represent your workers do hear about what goes on in the mining sector and also the fruit industry in the Western Cape in particular, and the seasonality of some of your workers also throws another potential conflict area into the mix. Are you confident that you can maintain the equilibrium?
Well, certainly I think we've got the things in place to maintain it, and we, as I indicated, it comes through communication and good work practices, and I think we have that within our company. We have a great understanding of how our company is doing because we have a very good employee share scheme that is out there that is well within the money, and we spend a lot of time and effort educating the employees as to the fortunes of the company.
That's the third biggest shareholder in the company, isn't it?
That's correct. That's correct. And we've been very lucky in that they have been, the company has, since the inception of that share scheme, done quite well, and the employees understand it, and they understand what drives the good fortunes of the company. So that, combined with a proactive relation into how we deal with unions and the communications there, has worked for us. I hope it works for us going forward.
How's the company going to expand from here? As I've said, catching more fish, finding more markets is one thing. There's also acquisitive possibilities, I suppose. I don't know if there's enough small companies or companies actually that are rather big enough to make any difference to you. But what's your vision for Oceana?
Yeah, look, certainly we've concentrated in the last few years our growth opportunities here in South Africa. We acquired 2 years ago a smaller company called Lusitania, and we are in the process now of acquiring the fishing assets of the Food Corp Group. That's busy going through regulatory approvals right now. It needs to have the approval of the Minister of Fishing and also of the Competitions Commission. And those will be important steps for us. Growth outside that, we're looking at other African countries. We think our skill set, we are, by global standards, a large fishing company. Not
just for an export, but actually to open operations there.
Correct, correct. And so we think that we can take some of our skill set and our balance sheet to other African countries where possibly the fishing industry isn't as developed as here, and we think that we can add value. And we are looking at that now.
When you look at that, do you worry about piracy? Because I had a chat with somebody, an expert in the field, who says it's not spread to the West Coast, but it's certainly sort of starting to spring up a little bit. Do you ever worry about that sort of thing?
No, sure you do. And but I certainly think on the West Coast, we do currently, as we sit here today, I've got boats working in Namibia, and we've got boats working in Angola. We've worked in Mauritania before. We've worked in Morocco. So we do have some experience with it, and certainly we're fortunate enough not to have had any challenges on the West Coast. The East Coast is a bit more difficult. We don't have any operations on the East Coast, but I am told that seems to be coming in order now. The problem around Somalia that everyone's learnt about is starting to die down. It's got a long way to go. But certainly we aren't operating in any area that would give me undue sleepless nights.
As an aside, I've heard that the fish stocks on the East Coast, in that area down from Somalia, have recovered enormously because fishing boats are not going in there anymore for obvious reasons.
Quite correct. No, it has had that effect, and undoubtedly, while I'm certainly not advocating piracy, there was some reason as to why some of those people started along the lines that they did. You know, I think it then became into a very big business when they started taking oil tankers, etc. But it has had the effect of deterring some of the illegal fishing that was going on there, which has had a positive effect for fish stocks.
Finally, 2018 coming up, that'll be your 100th anniversary. Do you think it will carry on for another 100 years in the same form?
I certainly hope so. I mean, the company has done well, and it's done well by being responsible, and I'm fortunate to play a part of that at the moment, but I certainly hope it carries on long after I carry on.